Look at those shoes. Boy, and look at that skin, because no child who looks like you walks in here with a real platinum card." Those words fell from Richard Harlan's mouth with cold certainty as his hand shot forward, tearing the envelope from Jamal Carter's grip and shoving the 12-year-old backward with a force meant to sting more than skin. Jamal stumbled, his shoulder striking the hard edge of the counter, sending a sharp bolt of pain through his thin frame, and the lobby erupted in a low murmur of amusement that cut deeper than the shove itself. The humiliation left him frozen for a moment, breath tight, eyes burning, while Harlan towered over him with a glare that carried years of hardened contempt. And in that instant, as the vice president barked for security and pointed at Jamal like a criminal, the path toward his own destruction began without him ever realizing that this moment would one day strip him of his career, his reputation, and everything he believed made him powerful. Before going into this story, please tell me where you are watching from, subscribe to the channel, and give me a like, because what you are about to hear is a powerful reminder of why dignity still matters, and why one voice raised at the right moment can turn an entire system upside down. Jamal Carter stood silently inside Citywide Trust Bank, holding the same envelope his grandmother had sealed with care before she passed away. He had walked there alone, in worn-out sneakers and an oversized thrift store jacket, with nothing but a quiet hope that he could check the balance of the account she saved for him over a lifetime of sacrifice. His voice had been steady and polite when he approached the counter. Yet Harlan's reaction had been immediate and cruel. The man did not see a grieving grandson. He saw a stereotype. He saw a target. Jamal did not understand how innocence could provoke outrage, or how a simple request could ignite such hostility. But he felt the weight of every stare pressing down on him as Harlan mocked him with ease that came from long practice. Jamal's hands trembled as he stood there, trying to hold on to the small sense of dignity his grandmother had taught him to protect. But the laughter around him made each second feel heavier than the last. He whispered that the card belonged to him, that his grandmother had trusted him with it, yet his words only fueled Harlan's scorn. The man leaned close enough for Jamal to feel his breath, and dismissed him with a cold certainty that stripped the air from the room. Jamal's chest tightened as the security guard approached, unsure whether to speak or stay silent, but Jamal saw traces of conflict in the guard's eyes. Even so, the guard obeyed Harlan's command, and Jamal was pushed toward a dingy corner meant for people the bank preferred not to see. He felt a sting of fear as his back hit the wall, but he kept breathing, kept steadying himself, kept holding on to the one message his grandmother left him. Dignity is something you carry. He sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching the letter she wrote, reading her words again and again to steady himself. The lobby around him was filled with wealthy customers who passed quickly through express lines, treated with ease and courtesy, while he sat isolated and judged without cause. He watched a man withdraw thousands of dollars without a single question. He watched others laugh quietly, assuming he must have done something wrong. He watched a woman glance his way, then look down as if eye contact alone might inconvenience her. Every second felt like a reminder that he did not belong in their eyes, no matter what his grandmother had left for him. But he stayed firm, reading her handwriting, hearing her voice in his memory, telling him that some storms must be endured before the sky begins to clear. He did not know that someone nearby had begun recording the scene. He did not know that the words spoken to him would soon echo across millions of screens. He did not know that the humiliation he suffered in silence would soon ignite a fire no one at Citywide Trust Bank could control. All he knew was that he had come for a simple truth. He had come to see what his grandmother worked for her entire life. He had come to honor her. The minutes dragged, each one tightening his chest, while Harlan strutted across the lobby with pride in the cruelty he delivered. He spoke loudly about fraud and scams, making sure others could hear, making sure the boy felt the sharp edge of his judgment. Jamal lowered his head for a moment, not in defeat, but to protect his spirit. And he remembered the kindness his grandmother showed patients who never thanked her. He remembered her standing beside his hospital bed when he had the flu, whispering that he was stronger than the world believed. He remembered her weary smile the night before she died, when she told him that everything she saved was meant to give him a future she herself had been denied. And as the police were called, and as the tension in the room thickened, and as the weight of silence grew heavier, Jamal felt something shift inside him. He did not cry. He did not plead. He did not break. He waited, holding the letter against his chest, believing that someone, somewhere, would see the truth. He did not yet know that his uncle, the man who fought battles in courtrooms across the city, was only moments away from learning what happened. He did not yet know that a storm of justice was gathering outside the bank's glass doors. He did not yet know that the humiliation he faced that morning would become the beginning of a reckoning that would change his life, reshape the bank, and destroy the career of the man who believed he could crush a child with nothing more than a cruel assumption. Jamal only knew that he had walked into the bank alone. He did not know he would not leave alone. Jamal sat in the dim corner of Citywide Trust Bank as Richard Harlan's order echoed through the lobby, and the silence from the crowd wrapped around him with the same weight as the accusation itself. Because no one stepped forward, no one questioned the cruelty, and no one challenged the lie that labeled a 12-year-old boy as a criminal. He placed both hands on his knees to stop the trembling, breathing slowly, holding the letter his grandmother wrote as if it were the last warm thing left in the room. Harlan kept glancing at him with the smug certainty of a man who believed his authority was absolute. And he spoke loudly enough for nearby customers to hear, repeating the word fraud as if repetition could turn prejudice into truth. Jamal looked down at his old sneakers, the same ones his grandmother bought at a thrift store for $3. And he remembered how she knelt beside him to tie the laces when he was small, whispering that shoes do not define dignity. Yet today, those same shoes had become the weapon used against him. A wealthy man in a tailored coat withdrew $15,000 without a single question from the teller. A woman with a designer purse stepped back when she saw Jamal, clutching her bag as if he might leap forward and take it. Another customer smirked, nudging his companion, whispering words meant to stay quiet, but carried far enough for Jamal to hear. He felt heat rise in his face, not from anger, but from a deep, painful shame forced upon him by strangers who did not know his name, his story, or his grandmother's sacrifices. He lifted his head for a moment, hoping someone might see past the clothes and recognize his humanity. Yet every gaze slid away, choosing comfort over courage. The air grew colder when 2 police officers entered the bank. Harlan raised his hand instantly, pointing at Jamal with a flourish that suggested triumph rather than truth. The officers approached, their voices firm, asking Jamal to stand. He obeyed, his legs unsteady, and handed them the envelope with careful hands, trying not to show fear. One officer inspected the documents roughly, pulling out the platinum card as if expecting it to crumble under his touch, while the other questioned Jamal with a tone that assumed guilt before facts. Jamal answered quietly and respectfully, because dignity was the only defense left to him. The officers exchanged a look, neither convinced nor compassionate, and continued searching his papers with the impatience of men convinced their time was being wasted on a child who should never have been allowed through the doors. Tyrone Mitchell, the security guard, watched from across the lobby with a clenched jaw, his eyes betraying the conflict he fought every day. He had once refused to arrest a black teenager who did nothing wrong and paid for that act of conscience with the end of his police career. That memory haunted him now as he watched another child endure the same injustice. Yet fear for his job held him still, pressing him into a silence that felt like betrayal. Sarah Jenkins, the teller who had joined in the early mockery, began to falter. She glanced at Jamal, then at the officers, then at Harlan, and something shifted in her expression. Her sister's voice echoed in her mind. Recalling workplace humiliation, no one had dared to stop. And Sarah felt the first sharp sting of guilt. She whispered to Harlan that the card looked real, but he dismissed her with a wave, claiming expertise built over 25 years. His voice carried across the room with the pride of a man who had never been challenged, never questioned, never held accountable. Emily Patterson, a wealthy customer who once donated to civil rights causes, watched the scene unfold with a tightening in her chest. She felt an ache of recognition as she realized she had stayed silent far too long. She lingered near the entrance before leaving the bank. But the image of Jamal sitting alone in that corner followed her into the parking lot, where she stopped walking and stared at her reflection in the car window. She texted a friend that she had witnessed something terrible, hoping the words might ease the guilt pressing on her heart. Yet they only deepened it. Inside the bank, Jamal watched the officers handle his grandmother's documents with indifference, and he felt a hollow ache settle in his chest. He remembered nights she returned from long shifts at the hospital, still smiling despite exhaustion, telling him she wanted him to grow up believing he belonged everywhere his feet carried him. Her sacrifice filled his thoughts now, wrapping around him with a strength he desperately needed. He reread her letter, letting the familiar handwriting steady him. Her words reminded him that dignity is a burden one must hold even when others try to take it away. The minutes passed slowly, each one amplifying the injustice he faced. A young customer, unnoticed by those in power, continued recording the scene on their phone and uploaded it to social media with the caption, "Banking while black at Citywide Trust." The video began spreading at a speed none of them inside the bank could imagine. Within 10 minutes, it reached tens of thousands of views. Within half an hour, it soared past 300,000. Civil rights advocates began sharing it. Local organizations tagged prominent attorneys. Strangers commented in outrage, demanding justice for the boy forced into a corner. Yet Jamal sat unaware of the digital storm growing around him, unaware that his humiliation was now unfolding on screens across the country. He only knew that he had never felt so small, so exposed, so judged without cause. He held his grandmother's letter tighter, whispering her words under his breath, grounding himself in her love. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, but his spirit did not collapse. He remembered her telling him that storms end, even when they feel endless. As the officers prepared to escort him out of the building, Jamal heard his phone buzz inside his jacket. He did not know that his uncle Marcus had just seen the video. He did not know that a man known across Los Angeles courtrooms for fighting discrimination was already racing toward the bank with a fury that no policy manual could contain. Jamal sat in silence, unaware that justice was already on its way, and that each second of cruelty he endured was pushing the man responsible for his suffering closer to a reckoning he could not escape. The video of Jamal sitting alone in the corner of Citywide Trust Bank surged past 300,000 views within 30 minutes, spreading with the speed of outrage, and with every share, every comment, every repost. The humiliation Richard Harlan inflicted began turning into a mirror reflecting his own prejudice back at him, though he remained unaware that the world was watching. Jamal sat quietly, holding his grandmother's letter, reading the same lines again and again, seeking the strength hidden in her handwriting. He remembered her telling him, on nights when her hands were swollen from long hospital shifts, That dignity is the one possession no one can take unless you let them." Those words carried him now as the officers hovered nearby, waiting for instructions that had no basis in truth. Harlan continued to talk loudly about fraud, ignoring the uneasy glances from staff who were beginning to question the situation. Sarah Jenkins felt a heaviness settle in her chest each time she looked at Jamal. She saw the slight tremor in his hands, the steady lift of his chin despite fear, and she remembered the day her own sister faced harassment at work while co-workers remained silent. That memory struck her with fresh clarity. She wondered how she had allowed herself to become part of a cruelty she would have condemned in any other circumstance. Her voice wavered when she attempted again to tell Harlan that the card looked legitimate, but he dismissed her sharply. Years of unquestioned authority had taught him that his judgment was flawless. The prejudiced lessons passed down from his father echoed in his mind with stubborn certainty. He believed he was merely protecting the bank from imagined threats, blind to the truth that he was exposing his own hatred. Jamal tried to remain calm as the officers rifled through his documents. Each rough movement sent a jolt of panic through his chest, yet he kept his eyes lowered to hide the fear. He whispered to himself that he had done nothing wrong. He whispered that his grandmother would not want him to break. The officers exchanged quiet murmurs, not finding anything suspicious in his papers, yet unwilling to contradict a bank executive. Jamal caught a glimpse of Tyrone Mitchell across the lobby. The security guard's eyes held a conflict that seemed to pull at him from the inside. Tyrone remembered the day he lost his badge for refusing to arrest a black teenager without cause. The memory returned with a vivid sting, reminding him of the price he paid for choosing integrity. He saw the same injustice unfolding before him now, and the weight of his silence pressed against his conscience like a stone. He took a small step forward, then stopped, fear battling with duty. Emily Patterson, who had already left the bank, stood in the parking lot staring at her reflection, replaying the scene in her mind. She had always believed she supported fairness and equality, yet her silence inside the bank told a different truth. She felt ashamed of her fear, ashamed that she had looked away from a child in pain. She typed another message to a friend, describing everything she saw, hoping the act would lighten her guilt. But it only deepened her sense of responsibility. Inside the bank, Harlan received a call from his superior, but he ignored it, convinced the matter was beneath the director's concern. He did not know that the director had already seen the viral video. He did not know that reporters had begun calling the bank's headquarters. He did not know that the storm building outside the glass doors was about to crash down on him with a force he could not control. Jamal's phone buzzed again. He had texted his uncle earlier, telling him the bank refused to let him check the account and had called the police. He did not know whether the message had gone through. He did not know that Marcus Carter was already on his way. As the views continued to climb, civil rights organizations began posting the video, condemning what they saw as blatant discrimination. One group tagged Marcus directly, urging him to intervene. Marcus had been reviewing a case file when the alert flashed across his phone. He opened the video, saw Jamal sitting in the corner with fear in his eyes, and felt his breath shorten. Rage rose within him, sharp and unyielding. Memories of similar cases flooded back. Cases where innocent men and women had been humiliated, dismissed, treated as criminals because of their skin color. But this was not a stranger. This was his nephew, a child who had lost his grandmother only months ago, a child who trusted him. Marcus stood abruptly, grabbing his keys with a speed that startled his assistant. He ordered her to follow with the legal files and to bring an iPad. She saw the fury in his expression and said nothing, knowing better than to question a man whose life's work had been fighting injustice. Back inside the bank, the officers continued questioning Jamal, asking the same things in different ways. searching for inconsistency where none existed. Jamal answered politely, his voice quiet but steady. He felt small beneath their suspicion, but refused to let fear claim him fully. He kept holding his grandmother's letter, running his thumb over the creases she left in the paper. The minutes stretched, heavy and slow, as he waited for someone to believe him. Sarah finally walked toward Harlan, steadier this time. She told him they needed to verify the card properly. He waved her off with irritation. He told her she was being naive. He told her she did not understand how people like that operated. The phrase struck her like a slap. Her face tightened, and her stomach turned. Jamal heard the words clearly and felt something inside him weaken for a moment. He wondered how many times his grandmother had endured words like that without letting him know. He wondered if she had felt the same sting of invisibility. Tyrone took another step, closer this time, but Harlan turned and glared, warning him silently to stay in place. The guard's shoulders sagged, torn between survival and conscience. Jamal's heart ached as he watched the man struggle, knowing he was not the only one suffering in silence. Then the bank doors swung open behind him. A sudden jolt of movement rippled through the room. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Sarah's breath caught. Harlan stiffened. Jamal looked up. He did not yet know who had arrived. He only felt a shift in the air. A shift that felt like the first break in a long, cold storm. He did not know that justice had stepped inside the building at last. He did not know that his uncle's arrival would change everything. He only knew that something powerful had begun. The glass doors of Citywide Trust Bank swung open with a force that drew every eye in the lobby as Marcus Carter stepped inside, his presence cutting through the room with a clarity that made the officers shift uneasily and made Richard Harlan freeze mid-sentence. Because the man who entered was not simply a visitor, but a civil rights attorney known across Los Angeles courtrooms for dismantling discrimination with precision and calm fury. And the moment his gaze fell on Jamal, sitting in the corner, the atmosphere changed like a sudden shift in weather. Marcus moved quickly toward his nephew, his steps sharp and unwavering, and when Jamal looked up, the fear in his eyes broke into quiet relief as he rose and fell into his uncle's embrace. Marcus placed one steady hand on the back of the boy's head, holding him gently but firmly, then turned with a controlled, chilling anger toward the officers who had surrounded him. His voice was low but carried across the room with unmistakable authority as he asked whether his 12-year-old nephew had been detained without cause. The officers exchanged glances, their earlier confidence disappearing beneath the weight of a man whose name many in law enforcement knew with caution. They mumbled that they had been called for a possible fraud case. Marcus corrected them with a fierce calm, stating that what they responded to was not fraud, but racial bias, and that they had been misled by a bank employee acting on discriminatory assumptions rather than evidence. He held the envelope of documents in his hand. Raising it with precision, he identified himself formally as Jamal's attorney and demanded to know on what grounds a child holding legitimate bank documents had been publicly humiliated. His assistant hurried in behind him with an iPad already displaying the viral video, which Marcus held up intentionally so that the officers, the staff, and every nearby customer could see it. The number of views visible on the screen showed hundreds of thousands, climbing by the minute. The officers grew visibly uncomfortable. One apologized quietly, stating they had acted on the information provided. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His restraint held more power than anger ever could. He dismissed the officers with a simple instruction to leave unless they intended to file a formal report, which they quickly assured him they did not, as they exited the bank. Their departure left a vacuum in the room that pulled attention back to the center of the conflict. Harlan. The regional vice president had gone pale, his earlier bravado drained from his posture as he realized the attorney before him was not only familiar, but infamous within banking circles. He struggled to regain composure, claiming that he was merely following standard fraud procedures. Marcus approached him slowly with a level gaze that conveyed both disappointment and a professional certainty that could dismantle the man's argument with a single sentence. He asked what procedure required assuming guilt based on a child's shoes. He asked what policy demanded calling the police before checking documentation. He asked why a platinum account held by a black minor triggered immediate suspicion. Harlan faltered, his voice thinning under the weight of each question. He repeated the word protocol, but it no longer held meaning in the presence of the truth pressed upon him. At that moment, the bank's regional director, Victoria Lang, stepped into the lobby, urgency visible in her expression. She had rushed to the branch after seeing the viral video and recognizing the potential catastrophe unfolding under her oversight. Marcus greeted her with professional restraint, but his displeasure was unmistakable. He held up the iPad again, showing her the footage. Victoria's face tightened as she watched Harlan bark orders, mock Jamal's appearance, and accuse him without reason. She knew at once the severity of the situation. Her voice softened when she addressed Marcus, acknowledging that the video had reached senior leadership and that the bank was preparing an emergency response. She then turned to Jamal, offering him an apology that carried genuine regret. Marcus did not allow the moment to drift. He insisted that Jamal's account be accessed immediately, and Victoria complied without hesitation. The staff hurried to assist, their earlier indifference replaced by urgency and fear. Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, her voice shaking as she apologized to Jamal directly. She admitted she had allowed fear to dictate her actions, confessing she should have defended him. Her eyes filled with remorse when she saw the exhaustion in his face. Tyrone Mitchell quietly approached Marcus, asking for a private word. He confessed that he had witnessed everything and that he should have intervened sooner. He explained his past, how refusing to make an unjust arrest had cost him his career as a police officer, and admitted that the memory had paralyzed him today, leaving him ashamed. Marcus listened carefully, then placed a hand on Tyrone's shoulder, acknowledging the weight the man carried and telling him that the truth he was now willing to share would still matter. Victoria, trying to regain a sense of order, ordered the teller station to open Jamal's account immediately. She instructed her staff to document every detail, her tone making clear that the bank would not escape responsibility. The tension in the room rose again as the computer screen blinked to life. Jamal stepped closer to the counter, still holding his grandmother's letter, and watched the teller type his information carefully. The seconds felt long as the system processed the request. Marcus rested a steady hand on Jamal's back, grounding him in the moment, when the balance finally appeared on the screen, $750,000. The entire lobby fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the room. One customer stepped forward as if he had misread the number. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands. Even Victoria blinked in disbelief. Harlan staggered backward slightly, his face draining of color as the magnitude of his mistake became undeniable. His eyes darted between the screen, Jamal, and Marcus, realizing with growing terror that he had not only humiliated an innocent child, but had done so in front of a camera, a crowd, and now millions of online viewers. Marcus looked directly at him, his voice calm but edged with steel. He explained that the $750,000 represented 45 years of sacrifice by Jamal's grandmother, a community nurse who had survived workplace discrimination, grueling shifts, and constant barriers, yet managed to save nearly every penny for the boy standing before them. Marcus then stated clearly that this was no misunderstanding. This was discrimination. This was humiliation. This was a violation of civil rights that would not be ignored. And for the first time since the morning began, Harlan understood the full weight of what he had done and the reckoning that was already coming for him. The number on the screen, $750,000, hung in the air like a verdict no one could escape. And in that silent instant, every layer of Richard Harlan's arrogance collapsed beneath the truth that had been hidden behind a pair of worn sneakers and a child's quiet courage. Because the balance did not merely reveal money. It revealed 45 years of love, sacrifice, and dignity from a grandmother who worked night shifts in public hospitals while being denied promotions for reasons that mirrored the very prejudice now unfolding before them. Jamal stood still, holding his grandmother's letter, staring at the number she had fought for through decades of exhaustion and modest meals. And as the lobby fell silent, he felt both pride and grief rise together, knowing she had saved every penny so he could have a chance she never had. Marcus placed a hand on his nephew's shoulder and turned toward the room with a calm authority that felt heavier than anger. Because the truth on the screen exposed every accusation, every insult, every moment of humiliation inflicted on the child whose only mistake had been walking into the wrong bank at the wrong time. Marcus looked at the staff and the customers, his voice low but resonant, explaining that this money represented a lifetime of discipline and hardship endured by a woman who cared for 6 strangers without complaint. He described how she faced discrimination silently, how she worked night after night so Jamal would never have to swallow the bitterness she endured. His words cut through the room with a weight that made even those who had watched silently feel the sting of their inaction. Harlan's face drained of color. His eyes flicked toward the exit, toward the security cameras, toward the customers recording him now with open phones. He realized, too late, that the humiliation he had forced onto a child was now returning to him in full measure, multiplied by every witness and every screen broadcasting the scene. He tried to speak, but nothing came out except a choked exhale, and the silence that followed exposed him more thoroughly than any argument Marcus could have offered. Tyrone Mitchell stepped forward then, no longer willing to be silent. His voice shook with guilt as he admitted to Marcus and Victoria that he had witnessed everything from the beginning and had allowed fear to stop him from stepping in. He explained how his police career ended because he refused to make an unjust arrest, how that memory haunted him, how today he had relived the same moral battle and allowed himself to lose again until now. He said he could no longer stand by while a child suffered, and he offered to testify to every detail he had seen. He handed Victoria his resignation, saying he would rather leave the job than carry another moment of silence on his conscience. Victoria accepted it with a quiet nod, her expression taut with the weight of a scandal she could no longer contain. She knew that the fallout would be massive. Reporters would soon arrive. Headquarters would demand answers. The board would scramble to salvage the bank's reputation. And the video, already at nearly 1 million views, had begun spawning angry calls, messages, and live stream reactions from civil rights groups across the state. And then, from outside, came the sound of distant voices. At first, it was only a faint echo, but it grew quickly, rising from the sidewalk outside the bank and swelling into a chorus that made every person inside turn toward the windows. A crowd had begun forming. Dozens at first, then hundreds, people holding signs, chanting, demanding justice, calling out the bank's name. Emily Patterson stood among them, no longer silent, holding a sign that read, "No justice, no peace," her expression resolute as she faced the building she had left earlier in shame. She had returned because she refused to remain complicit, because she realized silence is its own form of cruelty, and she wanted the child inside to know he was not alone. Sarah Jenkins approached Marcus with tears streaming down her face. She admitted she had joined in the early mockery because she feared losing her job, but that fear no longer mattered to her. She confessed that she remembered her sister crying at the kitchen table years ago after being mocked at work. and that today she finally understood what silence costs. She told Marcus she would testify. She would tell the truth. She would face whatever consequences came. Marcus acknowledged her with a slow nod, neither absolving nor condemning her, but recognizing that accountability sometimes begins with painful honesty. Victoria stepped forward then, commanding the room with a firm voice. She announced that Harlan was suspended immediately, effective that moment, pending a full corporate investigation. The words hit Harlan with the force of a physical blow. He stammered, insisting he was only protecting the bank from fraud. But no one listened. His authority dissolved before he could grasp it, and the customers who had once looked at him with respect now stared with disdain or pity. The humiliation he had inflicted on a child now unfolded around him with a quiet but devastating symmetry. The crowd outside grew louder. Reporters began arriving. Cameras pointed at the bank entrance. Victoria instructed the staff to lock the doors temporarily to manage the escalating scene. The sound of chanting penetrated the walls, a rhythmic reminder that injustice never stays hidden for long. As the bank descended into controlled chaos, Marcus guided Jamal toward a private office to protect him from the noise. But before they stepped away, Marcus turned one last time to Harlan. His voice was calm but edged with the finality of truth. He reminded the man that his actions had not only humiliated a grieving child, but had revealed the prejudices he carried into his position of authority. He told him the reckoning he now faced was not personal revenge, but the natural consequence of choices made without compassion. As Marcus spoke, Harlan's eyes lowered to the floor, the reality of his downfall settling over him like a heavy, unshakable weight. He saw the cameras outside. He saw the director documenting everything. He saw the staff stepping away from him. He saw his career slipping beyond reach. When Jamal and Marcus walked away, the boy still clutching his grandmother's letter, Harlan remained standing alone in the center of the lobby, adrift in a silence that felt colder than anything he had ever delivered to another human being. He finally understood that the humiliation he thought he had the power to inflict had become the very instrument of his undoing. His downfall had begun, and nothing could stop it now. Marcus Carter's civil rights lawsuit against Citywide Trust Bank moved through the legal system with the steady force of a tide that could not be stopped. And in the months that followed, every detail of the incident at the downtown branch was examined under the unforgiving clarity of courtroom lights, revealing a chain of discrimination so deep that even the bank's senior executives struggled to defend what had taken place, because the humiliation of a 12-year-old boy had grown into a national conversation about dignity, race, and the unseen biases embedded in institutions meant to serve the public. Citywide Trust agreed to a $25 million settlement before the case reached trial, not out of generosity but out of fear that a jury would award far more once they heard the recording, saw the viral video, and listened to the testimony of those who stood silent that morning. The settlement mandated sweeping reforms, mandatory anti-discrimination training across all branches, independent civil rights oversight, transparent auditing of loan practices, and a new community partnership fund aimed at serving marginalized neighborhoods. The bank's board issued a public apology to Jamal, acknowledging the pain he endured and the legacy of injustice his grandmother had fought against for decades. Marcus made it clear that this was not about money. It was about accountability. He stood beside Jamal at the press conference, one hand resting on his nephew's back, declaring that real justice requires more than apologies. It requires change that protects the next child who walks through a bank's doors. As the reforms rolled out, Richard Harlan's personal downfall unfolded with a painful, unavoidable clarity. He was fired with cause. The bank's internal investigation revealed a long history of discriminatory complaints against him, cases previously buried under procedural excuses and corporate indifference. He lost his severance. He lost his pension, and when Marcus included him as an individual defendant in the civil lawsuit, Harlan found himself facing personal financial liability he could not escape. The lawsuit drained his savings. His house, once a symbol of stability, slipped into foreclosure. His wife filed for divorce, unable to withstand the public scrutiny or the consequences of his choices. His 2 adult children, embarrassed by the media coverage and the vitriol online, distanced themselves quietly. Harlan moved into a small rental on the outskirts of Los Angeles, far from the home he once filled with confidence and routine. His phone stopped ringing. Old colleagues avoided him. Former friends pretended not to recognize his number. He spent nights replaying the moment he tore the envelope from Jamal's hands, knowing now that the cruelty he believed would go unnoticed had instead shattered the life he once controlled with pride. He wrote an apology letter to Jamal more than once, scribbling lines in uneven handwriting, but he always folded the paper and tucked it away, never sending it, because he no longer knew whether the apology came from regret or desperation, and he feared the truth of that answer. Sarah Jenkins's journey took a different path. After testifying in the lawsuit and admitting her participation in the early mockery, she realized she could not return to her old position. She left the bank voluntarily and enrolled in training programs focused on workplace fairness and inclusion. She became a speaker at local workshops, confessing openly how fear and silence had allowed her to harm a child. Her vulnerability brought meaning to her regret, and she dedicated herself to ensuring others would not repeat her mistakes. Tyrone Mitchell's transformation was profound. By resigning on the day of the incident, he reclaimed the integrity he believed he had lost. He began speaking at community centers, churches, and colleges about the importance of moral courage, and he told the story of the day he stayed silent too long, calling it the moment he refused to let fear rule him again. His honesty drew people to him, and for the first time in years, he felt his past mistakes moving into alignment with a purpose larger than himself. Emily Patterson joined the Community Oversight Board created as part of the settlement. She viewed her silence in the bank as a turning point in her life. She dedicated her time to ensuring customers were treated fairly, advocating especially for those who lacked the resources or confidence to challenge discrimination. She reached out to Jamal months later, apologizing for not helping when she should have. He accepted her apology with a quiet nod, grateful that she chose to act now even if she had not acted then. Jamal faced his own emotional journey. The weight of the incident lingered in his mind for months. At school, he struggled at first to understand why strangers recognized him. Some reached out with kindness. Others whispered about the money he now had access to, as if wealth erased trauma. Marcus enrolled him in counseling, knowing healing requires guidance just as much as courage. Jamal slowly regained confidence, finding comfort in the memory of his grandmother's strength. He began visiting community centers with Marcus, speaking in small gatherings about his experience. His voice remained soft, but each sentence carried the same dignity his grandmother taught him to protect. Over time, he found purpose in the very pain that once made him feel invisible. He told other children that their worth is not measured by their shoes, their clothes, or the assumptions of others. The day came when Jamal and Marcus attended Harlan's civil deposition. Harlan looked older than his age, his posture slouched under the weight of consequences he never expected. When Jamal entered the room, Harlan lowered his eyes, unable to hold the gaze of the boy he once mocked. Jamal sat beside Marcus, calm, composed, carrying both the memory of humiliation and the strength that grew from it when given a chance to speak. Jamal said only one thing: "I forgive you, not for you, but so I do not carry hate." His voice was steady, his eyes were clear, and in that moment, Harlan felt the depth of a grace he did not deserve. He bowed his head, unable to respond, as the deposition concluded. Jamal walked out of the room, leaving behind not only the man who once humiliated him, but the weight of the hurt that no longer defined him. His grandmother's words lived within him like a quiet flame, guiding him toward the legacy he was beginning to build. One rooted in dignity, resilience, and the courage to rise above cruelty with a heart that refused to harden. Jamal Carter grew into adulthood with the same quiet resilience that carried him through the day he was humiliated in that bank lobby. And as the years unfolded, the boy who once clutched his grandmother's letter for strength transformed into a young man who carried her legacy with purpose, discipline, and dignity, because he never forgot what she endured or what she sacrificed to build a future he could step into without fear. He worked hard through middle school, high school, and college, pushing past the lingering memory of the voices that once mocked his shoes and questioned his worth, turning that pain into a determination that shaped every choice he made. When he entered University of California, Los Angeles, majoring in political science with a focus on civil rights and public policy, he carried with him not the weight of trauma but the strength of survival. Remembering every word his grandmother wrote in that letter, he still kept safe in a small box beside his bed. He graduated with honors, his name announced in a crowded auditorium that erupted with applause from family, community leaders, and even strangers who had followed his story since childhood. And when he walked onto the stage to receive his diploma, he paused, looked upward, and whispered a quiet thank you to the woman who believed in him long before the world knew his name. Jamal entered law school determined to follow the path his uncle carved with such discipline and courage. He studied late into the night, learning the history of discrimination cases, reading opinions from judges who fought against bias, and preparing himself to become the kind of advocate who could protect those who might otherwise be ignored or dismissed. His professors saw in him not only academic excellence but a depth of empathy that distinguished him from others. They watched him take on pro bono work even before graduation, helping families facing housing discrimination, guiding teenagers navigating unfair school discipline policies, and supporting elderly clients whose concerns had been neglected. He earned the respect of his peers not with loud ambition, but with a steady, humble commitment to justice. By the time he passed the bar exam, he carried the same firm moral center that guided him as a child, holding his grandmother's letter in a hostile bank lobby. When Jamal accepted his first position as a civil rights attorney, standing beside his uncle Marcus in the offices of Carter and Associates, he felt the full weight of his journey settling into place. The office walls were lined with framed cases that changed policy, protected communities, and restored dignity to those who had been mistreated. Jamal's photograph joined those walls when he won his first major case, representing a teenager who had been denied a loan due to discriminatory assumptions. His victory echoed across the community, reminding everyone that dignity must be defended at every level. Meanwhile, Citywide Trust Bank carried the consequences of the incident for decades. The settlement mandated reforms that reshaped its operations. The new Community Oversight Board became an essential part of the bank's culture, ensuring voices like Emily Patterson's were heard and valued. The training program Sarah Jenkins helped design became mandatory across every branch in the region, and perhaps the most meaningful change of all came when the bank established the Louise Carter Scholarship Fund, offering financial support to Black nursing students who, like Louise, devoted their lives to caring for others. The scholarship ceremonies became annual events, held at the very branch where Jamal had once been humiliated. He returned each year, standing before rows of young nursing students who carried hope in their eyes, telling them about his grandmother's 45 years of service, her sacrifices, and her belief that dignity is something no one can take unless you surrender it. His speeches were quiet, heartfelt, and powerful, leaving listeners in tears as he described how one woman's perseverance created a legacy that outlived prejudice. the bank's lobby transformed as well. Where once there had been a dingy waiting area reserved for undesirable customers, the space was renovated into a community gallery honoring local history, resilience, and progress. At its center, in a glass case illuminated by soft, dignified lighting, sat the very pair of old sneakers Jamal wore the day he entered the bank as a frightened 12-year-old boy. The cracked soles and frayed laces were preserved exactly as they were. A simple plaque beneath them bore the inscription, "Dignity does not depend on the shoes you wear." Visitors stood before that display in silence, some wiping tears, some taking photographs, some explaining its meaning to their children. For many, the case symbolized the truth that judgment cannot define worth, and that small moments of courage can reshape institutions. On the day Jamal delivered the keynote speech for a new group of scholarship recipients, the lobby was filled with students, community leaders, and families from across Los Angeles. He stepped up to the podium with calm confidence, his posture straight, his voice steady. He spoke about the storm he once walked through, about the officers who searched him, the man who accused him, the crowd that stayed silent, and the voices that rose to defend him afterward. He spoke about his uncle's unwavering support, about Tyrone's repentance, about Sarah's growth, about Emily's transformation, and about the reforms that emerged from one terrible morning. Most of all, he spoke about his grandmother. He told the room that Louise Carter's life was a testament to perseverance and love, that she faced obstacles quietly but never allowed them to harden her spirit, and that everything he had become was a reflection of her strength. He held her letter in his hand as he spoke, the same letter that once steadied him in the darkest moment of his childhood. He read a sentence from it aloud. "Dignity is something you carry." The room grew still. Every voice fell silent. Every listener leaned forward. Jamal looked out at the faces before him. Students beginning their futures, community members seeking justice, families hoping for a better world. And he said that her words guided him every day. He closed the ceremony by looking upward once more, his eyes soft with memory and gratitude. With a quiet breath, he whispered, "I made you proud, didn't I, Grandma?" In that moment, surrounded by the legacy she helped create, he knew the answer. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please subscribe, give the video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.